Art is always around us in one form or another. We consume art by listening to music, going to cinema or theater, and attending exhibitions. But Falkland Islands community is not only art consumers, but also art creators. The amount of masterpieces displayed at local crafty events and the number of different arty workshops and societies on the islands is incredible. And people of all sorts of backgrounds find themselves immersed in different arts and crafts.
Art for me is just about being creative. So I do lots of watercolour painting and I do a little bit of writing. And I'm in FIODA, so lots of acting and dancing around on the stage. So I'm a big music fan. Anyone who listens to Simply Classical will know that I'm always going on about opera. The pleasure I get from art is both the sense of well-being it gives to me, but also the sense of sharing it with others. If you can create something that makes somebody else smile or think a little bit or experience something, then that's a wonderful shared moment. It's funny, you can get inspired by anything around you, and the Falklands is great. There are great wide open spaces, these huge landscapes, tons of really interesting wildlife, and I think most importantly tons of really interesting people who are happy to share their talent and their creativity, and just hearing other people being enthusiastic about what they do inspires you to be creative yourself. So when I was living in London, I guess I was a consumer of art. I would always try and go to the theatre and go and see interesting exhibitions and things like that, but there never seemed to be enough time to do art yourself. And the great gift that the Falkland Islands gives is to give you the time to do art, but also to be surrounded by some incredibly creative people. So one of the first things I did when I got here, by complete accident really, was to go to a watercolour workshop that was being hosted by the wonderful Richard Cockwell, the national treasure, renowned local artist. And he reignited in me really a passion for painting and drawing that I had when I was younger and that I'd forgotten about. So really it was beginning with watercolour painting and then getting involved with FIODA. And so a lot of my spare time is spent creating art and being around wonderful people who produce the most wonderful stuff.
I paint just solely watercolours. I think the landscape in the Falklands cries out to be painted, and I think that's really what jogged me into actually starting painting. But then also the wildlife. We've got fantastic wildlife. It's just a nice environment to paint. The light is fantastic here. It's almost like meditation. If you get involved in your art, you forget everything except what you're painting and such like. Although I find it's quite frustrating when I'm painting because I never do quite what I wanted to do. I forget about everything except what I'm doing. I didn't take it up till I was 16. I'd always been interested in it, but I'd never done it. I really didn't think of sort of setting up art classes or anything else. I was persuaded to do it. It was the wife of somebody who worked. She was actually very crafty. She was very good at wool and this sort of thing. And then she said to me, I'm organising a group and we want you to lead it. And so we went on from there. So this has all come as really quite a surprise to me. In fact, it still surprises me how good my students are and how much better they are than me.
It's like it's part of me. I miss it when I'm not doing it. The thing about drawing, if you're drawing from life, it's about learning how to see properly, because most of us make assumptions about what we're looking at. And it's not necessarily, everybody says, oh right, a face, okay, oval, 2 eyes, nose, mouth. But you're not really looking. And if you really look, yes, there are 2 eyes and nostrils and a mouth, and the face is roughly oval, more or less anyway. But unless you really look, it's just going to be like a schematic of a face. It's not going to be a likeness. They need to look like the person. But more than that, I like to capture something of the essence of an individual, their intelligence and their reasons for being alive, really. So that's quite a challenge. But the Falkland landscape has got so many interesting things in it, artistically. For one thing, it's the colour, which is very muted and really, I think, beautiful. And one of the things I love to do is to paint a big landscape with one of the tiny little isolated houses in it, because then you just get a splash of colour with a red roof or a green roof, and it brings the painting alive. I don't know how I get inspiration. I just see something and think, oh, I like that. And, you know, it's got possibilities. And sometimes it comes out well and sometimes it doesn't. And occasionally you see something that is so striking that, you know, you just feel you've got to do it.
I like painting mostly in oils. I like the texture and the viscosity of it, like the smudgeability to be able to blend and make kind of unique shapes and colours. My mum used to paint a lot when she was young, and she used to let me mess around with the watercolours and practice and do bits and bobs. But I always had a really inspiring art teacher. But when I was a kid, I would just sit for hours and just do colouring books for hours and hours and hours. It's good for kind of my decompression, certainly. For me, it's a method of communication, and if I wasn't able to do it, it would just be the most frustrating thing, I think. Art for me, it's therapy, it's communication. You can try and capture a moment with a photograph or with memory, but another way to convey the feeling that you get is just through art. And that's why I think I find art so interesting, because you can look at a painting and even maybe not even appreciate the whole part of it, but there's just one aspect of it that evokes a memory or a feeling, and that for me is just the coolest thing. So I really enjoy seeing other people's art, particularly in the Falklands. I think there's some amazing artists. The things I like to paint tend to be Falklands scenery. I think it's stunning, whether it's within Stanley or out in camp. There's so much sea and sky and contrast. I really enjoy it. It stands out and it gives you something that you want to capture, because it is such a beautiful landscape and it's such an interesting habitat. This is an inspiring place.
I really enjoy doing things with textiles and things that have texture, and often three-dimensional as well. So I really like things that kind of, ideally, artwork you can touch is what I love to be able to do. I've always loved creating things, but I think I started particularly with textiles when I was a teenager at high school, and it's just sort of evolved. I think a lot of the time I'm inspired particularly by the natural world, because there's so many beautiful colours and shapes and patterns. I really love pattern. We're so surrounded here by nature. There's so much to see, and you get, so many beautiful landscapes, and the skies here. One of the things I love about the Falklands is how much sky there is, and there's just so many beautiful colours and changes all the time in that. This particular piece, I think it was really about trying to express all of those things that go on inside your head and how it's always changing. So sometimes you might have more positive thoughts and other times it might be more negative thoughts, and it's always in a constant state of movement. So the idea was to kind of represent how busy and complicated it can be, but the piece was designed to be turned. So the idea is that it has 4 different directions depending on how you feel and what feels right for you. Art is such an important thing because it is the way we express ourselves, and there's so many different types of art and ways of expressing through art, so many different mediums, and it's that chance to express who we are and how we're feeling, expressing things that are difficult to talk about, so it can be a really good way of just getting those feelings out and down onto something concrete, and I think it's so valuable.
The Falkland Islands are full of talented people in all sorts of creative media, which makes art an important part of local community.